light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Eric Breault of Quantum Tones Healing. And the topic we wanted to try to address or to scratch the surface of, I guess, today is economic stratification, which is a great big word, but I think it's something that's all around us, but people have a lot of different ideas about it, and especially living in a time where humanity is on a collision course with global community. I think it's something we need to think about and talk about, and probably a lot more needs to be said than we could ever fit into a half-hour television show. But it's the basic notion throughout history, throughout human history, even oral history before written history was created, where for a complex constellation of reasons, some people wind up with lots of wealth and some people wind up with less. And it's not always because of who works the hardest. Sometimes it's the roll of the dice, as some might say, the changing tides of fortune and misfortune. It could be any number of things. Some people are born into wealthy circumstances, and it's a question of what they inherited, not what they actually earned. All the different things that people want to say about wealth, I don't know that any of them are accurate as an inclusive generalization. Each one is accurate in reference to specific examples, but none of them is a universal, no generalization is universally accurate. But the mindfulness, I guess, I would like to see us bring to this discussion is the ways that energy and resources move up and down through the strata. That there are lower strata and higher strata. There are people with minimal resources. There are people with lots of resources. There needs to be compassion throughout all the levels. A rich person dying alone is just as tragic as a homeless person dying alone. Both of them, my personal belief, if you will, is that when any spirit is crossing over, be it animal or human or whatever, that love is what fuels the journey to the other side, such that when something is dying, it needs to be surrounded by love so that it can effectively make the journey to the other side, whether you want to consider that journey to heaven or whatever, however you want to think of it.
Yeah, that journey is important. Having that love is important. Without that love, there is a saying that there are those who go to like a little resting space before they even can cross to that heavenly space, because it's like they call them like hospitals.
Okay.
They need to go to in order to fuel that love, and then they can transition to the other side more fully.
But if we surround them with love before they even get there,
they wouldn't have to deal with that.
They wouldn't have to deal with that.
They can just go straight there.
Which I'm not meaning to allude to Roman Catholic notions of purgatory when I say that, just as the basic dynamic, that if you were going on a journey, you would eat a good meal, you would take healthy snacks for you along the trip or whatever. In the same sort of way, if you're going on a spiritual journey of crossing from a physical life into a spiritual life, that you need to fuel that journey as well. And love is what you use to fuel the journey.
Yeah.
And so we have economic stratification in our earthly society, but a rich person coming to the point of death without being surrounded by love is just as tragic as a poor person coming to the point of death without being surrounded by love. The money doesn't matter at that point. What the money shows in between time is which strata you're on and what kind of person you are. Whether you're investing it where it's needed or whether you're hoarding it in ways that discourage healthy flow.
Yeah, you don't define yourself through wealth. You should define yourself through your essence, your spiritual, loving expression that you're meant to be. A lot of people fail to experience that love and that sharing, that compassion, that understanding. When you have all those traits, compassion, being compassionate and understanding, and giving love freely, you
Well,
can
and when
the,
you've accumulated wisdom to guide it.
yeah, so you'll be able to break out down the boundaries that are around you, the boundaries of separation between all the classes, from poor to middle class to rich. When you break that boundary, then that opportunity for mending together and for that change for the world would be for the better and more flow between all classes.
Well, and it takes a certain wisdom to make those transitions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not so much transitions as translations. The example comes to mind of a particular wealthy person who, because of ethnic heritage, wanted to bring a holiday celebration to what would be regarded as a third world country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, except that the gift was all sorts of things that would be understood by Western cultures that weren't really practical within that local culture.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be like giving cars to a country where most travel was done by water.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need cars; they need boats.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you target the gift or tailor the gift to match the recipient, to know them well enough to know what they value, what they need, how they orchestrate their lives, you wouldn't really know what to give them.
No.
You may be wealthy, they may be poor, but you have to know them well enough to know how they cope with life, to know where their shortcomings are. But that's where I'm saying it's not just money, it's also wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
But so you need the wisdom and you need the compassion that fuels it so that it actually happens. In the past, they would sometimes refer to this under the term of noblesse oblige, the idea that the nobles had an obligation to take care of the poor. That these were the people who worked their fields and created all the resources that they enjoyed, and so to be noble was to accept the responsibility of taking care of them. In the same way that a farmer, in times past would take care of the horse that would pull the wagon to go to town for supplies. Because without that horse, the farmer or the rancher would be walking. They depended upon that horse, so in return they would take care of the horse. They would call the veterinarian when necessary. They would feed the horse. They would give him good shoes, horseshoes, to protect their feet, whatever it was. And when they got too advanced in age, they would retire that horse and, train a younger horse. There was a certain period of time, and they would be sensitive to whatever the horse was going through throughout that time.
Mm-hmm.
In the same sort of way that there were jobs that the rich people either didn't want to do or couldn't do because they were busy managing things, didn't have time to be doing all the work that the servants were doing. It takes, I think, if somebody told me recently, this fantasy of going to such and such place and living off the land, and I said, consider for a moment how many hours a day you'd spend if you had to live off the land, because it takes a phenomenal number of hours to generate food. People who go to a grocery store and buy it don't realize how many hundreds, if not thousands, of hours go into the growing of each vegetable.
Yeah, the lack of knowledge. Even those who don't have the finances, but they have a wisdom that the richer people don't have, but the richer people have a wisdom that even they don't have.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
it should all be complementary.
Yeah, so perhaps opening the doorway for both to come kind of see, perhaps switch roles. Perhaps do a role play, switching, place themselves there and place themselves there. When they have that understanding, maybe they'll be more grateful for where they're at financially or class-wise, and they would be more blessed where they are class-wise, and perhaps they can collaborate in a way that where they can just kind of teach each other something. I think everybody has something to teach each other, you know.
I think that it may be risky to have them actually switch places because I don't think they could do each other's jobs.
No, but I could
But-
probably perhaps go, probably they can go there for a week and visit and see what they do, and perhaps they can go there, whatever. Switch, not switch, but visit maybe. Maybe visit and just sort of
Well, to be more aware
be more aware
of how interdependent everything is.
yes.
You know, it's easy for certain rich people to complain about bad service at a restaurant or something like that, and not denying that there are examples of bad service from time to time. It's easier to objectify the waiter and look down on him if you don't know his name and you don't know what he lives with and you don't know the circumstances he's struggling against. But when you're switching roles and finding out, okay, the farmer gets up at 5 a.m., you know, and works till 9 o'clock at night all summer long to haul all this grain into a place where it's gathered and sold and so forth, and they hand him a check, and for all of that, the farmer lives at a standard that is still well below what the rich man enjoys.
Yeah.
You know, living in a house that's not adequately insulated, that, you know, barely surviving from month to month, all sorts of challenges just to survive because they don't know anything else. But everything the farmer knows makes the creation of that crop possible. If you take an administrator in the city and dump him on the farm and say, okay, do the same thing, he couldn't.
No, he couldn't. And with that, when there comes an understanding of the role, when like the administrator would come and see for what their life is about, would understand, perhaps the administrator would find a way to make their life much better financially. Because without them, we wouldn't have the grocery stores full of food that are support us through the days to feed us.
Well, you wouldn't have anything to eat.
No, we'd starve to death without the farm.
There was a relatively well-known television show for quite a number of years called The Twilight Zone, where it would be these impossible fantasy kinds of alternative realities that would suddenly leap into existence for the sake of the show to teach us something. My thought, if I were to ever propose such a possibility for a show, is the wealthier, the upper middle class person who's complaining about the waiter and the gas station attendant and whomever, and how irritating all these people are because they just don't have proper manners and they don't treat me the way I want to be treated, and you know, we would be better off without them. And he wakes up the next morning and they're all gone. And so he's trying to go through his day. And, well, why didn't the janitor empty the wastebasket at his office? Well, there is no janitor. Well, I need to put gas in my car. Well, there's no gas station attendant. Well, I'm stop at the restaurant on the way home. Well, the restaurant's closed. There's no waitress. You know, and on it goes to where he figures out by the end of the day that he can't live a day of his life without depending upon all these other things. So when we talk about economic stratification, you know, some people don't seem to care how far apart the strata get and how desperately they're suffering on one level, while on another level they're so completely out of balance and so overstuffed they don't know what to do with it all. Not realizing, because they don't see them, how much that hoard of money up here is taking so much away from the people down here that their survival is in question. And if they don't survive, they will wind up like that man in the idea for a Twilight Zone episode that I had. You know, getting up one morning and the people aren't there anymore.
Yeah, and you realize how important these people are in our lives. Realize that they're doing things that, you know, that we don't feel grateful for. We don't give them recognition in what they do, or acknowledgement that they are making our lives easier. Mm-hmm. And with that realization,
things that we either can't do or won't do or don't want to do. There's some things that I suppose if I had to, I could do, but I would do it so badly, I would really rather give it to someone who has an aptitude for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are certain things we're not meant to do. And a janitor, somebody who's probably meant to keep the place clean, but also there are deeper meanings to what they're doing in their work. Different purposes, I should say, purpose. They could be having a nice interaction with a teacher, or have something to say that changes somebody's perspective. Just because they're a janitor doesn't mean that they have insight that needs to be shared. Because their insight is just as important as an insight of a janitor in the school as much as a superintendent.
Well, and the janitor may be aware of something going on within the student body that the teachers haven't noticed.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are examples of janitors who have been there in a moment of need for a particular student who may have been contemplating suicide because of how they were feeling bullied and so depressed by their circumstances. And the janitor was able to give them a moment of human compassion where they thought maybe it was worth trying another day, and they didn't go through with some kind of permanent horrible response to a grantedly painful and overwhelming problem, but there are other options.
Yes,
But when you get into those sorts of moments, it's difficult to see them. And sometimes the janitors see more than we realize. Speaking of which, the other thing to keep in mind is in these economic stratification, there are individuals that move between the levels, that need to move between the levels because they're valuable resources to the whole of humanity. Albert Einstein once worked as a school janitor because nobody understood who or what he was.
They thought he was one of those people who was just not smart.
He was somebody weird who didn't fit in because he was at such a genius level. He always had difficulties socially, and then it's suggested now that it's quite possible that he had Asperger's or autism.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
You know, but he was the most brilliant scientist of the 20th century. But he was working as a school janitor because nobody knew where else to plug him in, know who to introduce him to, or how to put him where he needed to be.
Thankfully, he was discovered somehow. I'm not sure, but he was, suddenly realized, oh my God, this guy's got some important information, important things that will help better humanity.
I guess the thing I would really want to bring to a conversation about economic stratification in an age heading toward global community is the ways that instead of looking for ways to stretch the spectrum wider, to instead think about continually reinvesting the money throughout the strata. That when you have enough that you now have everything you need, your house is paid for, your car is paid for, you're comfortable for the rest of your life, anything over that, you get to play the world's fairy godmother. Going around giving out college scholarships and funding the art department at a local elementary school, and all these things that are enriching people's lives and giving you this vibrant community to live in.
Those who struggle financially, they will be able to have the finances now because of that. Be able to
live in decent houses.
Yeah, get themselves educated, get their kids educated. Because I think the number one key is education.
Education counts for a lot, but there's a lot of renewal that needs to happen.
Yeah.
There was a government program a few years ago for, I think they called it Cash for Clunkers. The whole idea was that there was this government subsidy to help people with older cars buy newer energy efficient cars. The problem with that is that the program was set up so that anyone who made less than $30,000 didn't qualify. This was specifically a middle class phenomenon. It was not for the lower class people. It didn't make sense to me because the real clunkers on the road are the ones driven by the poor. The poor people are driving the most polluting, worst cars because the rich people don't want them anymore. So you could buy what used to be a rich person's car for a few $100s because nobody else wanted it. Why? Well, because it got bad gas mileage, it needed all kinds of repairs, it still ran barely, and that's all the poor person could afford, so they're driving this horribly polluting, gas-guzzling, ancient thing that barely rolls down the road because they have no other way to get to work. They're the ones who need the energy-efficient car, and getting that car off the road would have been much more of an asset to the environment.
Yes. Yeah. And that's important. Those people, need things that are better for them to drive, as well as for the climate. So those, if the people just allow them, the money just to go into the classes that are there, the 3 classes, the flow. If they have enough, they can the flow will go into the other classes that need it more. And it just keeps going, and it allows more balance and flow to come through all classes.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what his name was, but there was something I saw in the news about a man from China who had done phenomenally well financially. Mm-hmm. And instead of hoarding it or spending it all on himself, he went back to the village where he grew up, and he tore down the whole neighborhood and built brand new houses for all of them. Yeah. Brand new, energy efficient, solid houses. So they didn't have to live in old, falling down houses that were, cold in the winter and hot in the summer and bugs and just every kind of problem you could name. He gave the whole neighborhood free of charge brand new, energy efficient houses so that people could live in them and not be worried about fixing them all the time. Mm-hmm. They could actually focus on living their lives instead of always fixing this horrible broken down house that nobody else wanted because of how bad it is. There's a lot of old structures all across the world that need to be torn down and replaced because they were built with the technologies of 100 to 150 years ago that could not deal effectively with environmental concerns. But if we keep investing in all the strata, rather than allowing it to all sit at the top, it doesn't, in my opinion, it won't ever average out to where there is only one strata. There will always be the rich and the poor. But the fact that everybody cares makes the whole world a happier, more loving, more compassionate place.
No, there wouldn't be any labels. I think eventually the labels will disappear.
I don't think the labels would matter. They may still be there, but they wouldn't matter.
They wouldn't matter. You wouldn't call, you wouldn't say this person's poor and that person's rich. As we evolve, as humanity evolves, and continue that process, I believe that there will be no classes, because we will be in a more, not in the, I think in a sense, third dimension would not exist anymore. It'd be in a higher dimensional existence.
Well, now we've just jumped over in a whole nother discussion.
I know. Just basically that's what happens.
It
does
invite the possibility.
There will always be a third dimension. There will always be poor and rich in the third dimension. But there are different existences. I think we're getting towards that, where we can prepare ourselves.
What you're talking about is spiritual development.
Yeah, it's spiritual development, creating the foundation for that next existence.
Okay.
As humanity.
Which I don't know that you or I will live long enough to see that, but at least not in these bodies.
No.
But it's a worthy and highly recommendable direction to keep moving. For the moment, what I would encourage everyone to think about through our last half hour of rambling on this very complex subject is just that there are people out there, they have names, and the rich and the poor are so interdependent, and when the tornado or the hurricane or whatever it is hits, we're all just humans.
Yes.
And if you trace the DNA back, we all came from Africa. Even races and the diversity of religions are just human fabrications. We're all in this together, and we need to take care of each other.
That's important. sadly that we have societies that are communist societies that don't allow that. Really, the rich is there, it doesn't allow the person to jump from class to class. Well, thankfully, we live in a democracy, a society where we can.
We have the ability.
To
I don't think we've
down.
exercised it enough.
No, and I think.
But when you say the word communism, a lot of people tend to freak out.
Yeah.
My suggestion for what I think would make the world work is what I call organic communism, that which arises from within the person instead of being imposed by the government. You know, that this is a communistic system because I choose to give it. And I develop my mind and my awareness so that I can give wisely and effectively, so that I can make this financial or professional resource go further than anybody would imagine it could go. You know, and I can totally impress people with what a positive difference I can make in the world. That, to me, would be something really to be proud of. Suffice to say, there's a lot more to be said, and I hope a lot more people will talk about economic stratification and become more aware of it, because they're real people.
They are. They're just as genuine as anybody.
Yeah, and rich or poor, nobody should die alone.
No.
We're all family.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching also.